Before there were book clubs, there were literary salons. Let's talk about them. I find literary salons of the past so inspiring, and Horace had a definition for them, and that was to either please or educate. The salon first appeared in the 16th century in Italy, and it then flourished in France in the 17th and 18th century. The word salon first appeared in France in 1664, and they were an important place to exchange ideas. What I find really funny is that before the 17th century, these gatherings were often held in a lady's bedroom. The lady would sit in her bed or lie comfortably in her bed, and her friends whom she had invited would sit around her on chairs or on stools. And being allowed into a lady's bedroom meant that you were part of her inner circle. This was a big deal. I was so surprised to find out that the salons were mainly led by women. And I'm looking at my notes here. They selected the guests, they decided the topics of their meetings, which could be all kinds of topics: social, literary, political, and they also directed the discussions going on. Women had the opportunity here to let their voice be heard, to exchange ideas, to give their opinions. They were used to pursue a higher education. From the middle of the 19th century until the 1930s, a lady of society had to hold a day. This meant that the salon was open for visitors once a week in the afternoon or 2 times a month. These open days were announced in Le Bulletin Mondain, and you had to be very lucky to be picked because the guests were carefully chosen. It is so wonderful that these salons allowed women to share their opinions and their ideas. Because they were reading books, they could criticize the characters and the events in the books, which also allowed them to talk about their own situations and deliver social critique. Okay, what was being discussed in these salons? We had all kinds of topics ranging from literature to politics to social critique, and contemporary literature really dominated the discussions. It allowed authors to read excerpts from their works and see what the reaction was, and if the reception was good, it could completely transform the career of the author. This was a way to go viral in the past. Now, very important in these discussions was politeness. It was important to keep your voice down, to discuss the topics in a polite and decent manner, to listen to what other people said. The ability to disagree without offending was so important. It was an age of conversation. They were reading aloud novels, poetry, political texts, philosophy, even science. Reading aloud was central, and people would pause during their reading and they would discuss. So this turned to reading into a very social activity. And of course, we still do this today, like booktube and book clubs and gatherings and book events, buddy reads, and so on. A book was the magic that sparked deep conversation and new ideas. Of course, there was also negativity surrounding the salons. For example, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he thought that salons were corrupting. Some Enlightenment men resented women's influence, of course, and satirists mocked salon culture as pretentious. There were also opinions about what should be discussed and what should not. For example, Marcel Proust, he insisted that politics should be avoided in discussions. The women leading these salons were called salonières, and they were self-educated and very intelligent. There was an absence of social hierarchy. There was a mixing of social ranks and orders within the elite, of course. What really surprises me is that they encouraged discussions between men and women, and that the nobles and the bourgeois came together to discuss. Now, your clothing was also very important, of course. Aside from being polite, you had to be well dressed. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're new here, I hope you will stick around, and I will see you next week.